When I read complaints about Spelunky being too difficult, the conversation always seems to turn to the first area, dwelling. There are tons of traps and hazards that stick out to players in this level, and this can sometimes make or break a player wanting to continue with the game. But I think the two enemies people seem to have the most problems with are cave moles and horned lizards. I can certainly see why. Lizards can shred your entire health down to zero with their roll ability, and moles basically chip away at you one by one until there's nothing left. This is so bad for players that devs actually had to nerf the number of moles that were being spawned in this area. As I've noticed a lot of people, specifically newcomers, struggle with these enemies, I decided to make a quick video to hopefully prove they aren't as tough as they look. Moles only have a couple of states, burrow and charge. When burrowing in the ground, moles cannot be attacked directly, and you have to use a carefully placed bomb, which I would never recommend wasting on one of these enemy types. They will gravitate towards your character and eventually burrow out to attack. Once out of this burrowing state, they will charge towards your character or the opposite direction of where they've been burrowing. Eventually, they will hop back down into the ground or claw directly into a wall to continue burrowing. They have 3 hit points. I think the reason people find moles so irritating is because they can basically rush you from any angle. They can drop down from the ceiling directly at you, or if you are running, can surprise you off screen and run right into you. This is where situational awareness and reflexes come in handy. You can look down before dropping to a new level, so you should use this ability as much as you can. If you spot a mole burrowing around, you know there will have to be one roaming at that location when you drop down. Listen out for the burrowing noise they make, and keep your eye fixated on where one is burrowing. The noise will change when they are exiting the dirt, so when you hear this you should be aware one might be coming for you and get ready to dodge. Moles cannot burrow through areas that are not dirt. This includes arrow trap blocks, wood and skull piles. You can use this to your advantage by attacking a mole, picking it up and placing it in an area you know you are unlikely to be exploring next, or into an area in which they'll be sealed off from burrowing out. Derek Hugh mentioned on his Twitter that you should try to use moles to trigger traps, and this is what they come in useful for the most. They will often burrow out and run into traps such as the arrow trap. Alternatively, if you can stun one, you can pick it up and throw it at an arrow trap to finish it off and render the trap harmless to you. Stun moles can also be picked up and thrown into spike pits, or dropped next to push traps to end them quickly. Although it may seem like a good strategy to avoid moles at any cost, I tend to find engaging them when they are unburrowed is the safest option. Once you have one stunned, by either jumping on its head or getting the timing right with your whip, you can throw rocks, skulls, or bodies at them repeatedly to get rid of them for good. This means that once they are dead, they will not come back to haunt you later in the level, and you'll have a body ready for a sacrifice at the altar should you be able to find one. Rather than throwing objects straight at a mole and it arcing over them, a good strategy with any enemy is to jump and throw the object directly down at the floor so that it bounces and hits the target. If you have the pitcher's mitt, you don't need to worry about this move as much as the object will be thrown straight forward, but be aware of your surroundings. You don't want to accidentally throw something at a shopkeeper off screen. As a general rule of thumb in Spelunky, you should be holding any object at all times. It doesn't really matter what it is. You always need some way to defend yourself other than your whip, and you'll find throwing objects can cancel a lot of enemy attacks at a distance far more effectively than your whip can. Pick up objects before going through an exit, so that if something takes you by surprise at the next level, you can quickly throw it at an enemy. Holding onto objects will also mean you don't have to waste a bomb or rope to set off an arrow trap if you arrive at the next level without an object spawning that can be thrown to activate it. Even better than rocks and skulls are arrows, which will take 2 damage from an enemy they hit. Once they hit something though, they will break, and the end of the arrow is all that will remain. Ends of arrows will do no damage to a target, but they will stun them for a very short amount of time. Be careful when using any thrown object that you do not hit yourself, but especially try not to hit yourself with an arrow. Even better than arrows are bodies, as they cannot directly damage you when thrown. The best strategy of them all against any standard enemy with multiple hit points is chucking the body at the enemy, picking up the body and throwing it again whilst it's stunned, and repeating until it is dead. If you picked up the stunned enemy by accident, do not worry, just move them away from the body you've been using to attack, drop the enemy, and rinse the attack again. Do not spam your whip against stunned enemies. This will waste time and can risk you still getting hit if you get the timing wrong. Pets are one of the best weapons in the game, if you do not have a standard weapon at hand. This may sound ridiculous, but they will remain invulnerable when being thrown. This means that any enemy hit by a pet will take damage, but your pet will remain unharmed and stunned for a brief period, which gives you time to pick them back up before they run away. Although moles are best dealt with quickly, patience is also a virtue with these creatures. If you see one running directly towards you, instead of continuing to run, stop, plan your jump or whip, and strike when the timing is right. You can also run back and pull yourself up to a ledge, wait for them to burrow, and then continue, or wait for them to be positioned directly under where you are hanging to drop on them. You can lure moles out when you see one burrowing close by. Wait close to where they are burrowing, but not so close that you'll get hit. Moles have invincibility frames when they are unburrowed, so do not attack them as soon as they emerge. Instead, stand at a distance and plan your attack before engaging. Finally, as with all bodies, you really want to get moles onto the altar when they are stunned if you can, as they'll be worth more influence towards getting items. Whipping and jumping on enemies will actually stun them for longer than throwing objects at them, so if you have far to carry a body to an altar, it is possible to use these attacks to allow for more time before they wake up. Be sure to put an enemy down before it becomes unstunned by listening out for the wobbly noise they make, as well as a shaking effect. Always carry dead bodies over other items if you don't have anything important. As mentioned before, they are an excellent way to deal with other enemies, but you'll also be thankful you brought it with you over, say, a rock, if you happen upon an altar later in the level. Lizards have a few states to consider. The first is an idle state, in which the lizard will pace very slowly along the ground until it hits a wall or edge, and will then turn back around. It will stop intermittently between these walk cycles, which gives you a good chance to engage. If it is standing on one single block, it will wait and do absolutely nothing until triggered by the player. As soon as the lizard sees the player, it will jump, roll into a ball, and keep rolling along the floor until it reaches the end. If you are hit by one of these attacks, it can be devastating, as you will often be knocked into other hazards, or back into the lizard that can mess you up with another attack. Any other enemy, such as the mole or caveman, will also be affected by this roll attack, and if any of the bodies hit you, they can knock you out and take damage. This renders throwing bodies at rolling lizards useless, which goes against what I mentioned in the cave mole section. This is the only instance I would not recommend using bodies to tackle an enemy. Instead, throwing rocks and other hard objects at a rolling lizard will cancel the attack and stun lock them. The whip and jump ability will also remain useless when a lizard is rolling. Once a lizard has taken 2 hits, it will no longer be able to roll. This is where they are at their most vulnerable, and will still try to make your life difficult by running slowly from side to side and occasionally jumping. At this point, they shouldn't be too hard to finish off if they are in the way, otherwise you can just avoid them. As soon as you see a lizard jumps up, it's time to run back and find somewhere safe to wait for them to finish rolling. Do not attempt to hang to a ledge when jumping away from a rolling lizard, as once it hits the side of the wall it will bounce upwards and still hit you in this state. Patience is absolutely the most vital tool in defeating lizards. You can use their slow idle state to your advantage by waiting patiently to strike. If you are coming down from a top level and there is a lizard below you, wait until it is directly below you and drop on its head. Not only will this stun the lizard, but it will also render any fall damage you would have taken meaningless, as an enemy below will break your fall from any fall distance. When coming at a lizard from the side, only engage it if its back is turned to you, or if you are certain you'll be able to jump on its head or whip it without it spotting you. Make sure if a lizard is close to a wall and it is about to turn around, you don't just run in for an attack in a hurry, as you could risk it turning around and spotting you. Instead, wait for it to turn around, complete its cycle, and attack once it is facing the opposite direction again. If a lizard is in your way above you and is not able to move, you'll need to throw something at it or lure it away before continuing. A quick whip can stun a lizard before it has time to roll into a ball, but sometimes a safer approach can be to lure the lizard by doing a small jump and letting it roll over your head in midair. Sometimes, due to the geometry of the level, this is not possible as the lizard will jump, hit a wall above, and land directly back into position. When lizards are picked up while stunned and thrown, they will always roll into a ball. This can be a useful attack when you need to clear out enemies, but remember bodies that hit you from a roll attack will then also damage you. You can throw lizards into traps same as any other enemy, but as they roll, the physics will handle a bit differently. Sometimes you can bounce lizards off a wall and get them to fall down into traps. I'll say it again though, you should try and get those lizards onto the altar, but there's more of a risk here if you mess up. They don't leave a body behind, so they can only be sacrificed if stunned. As with most stronger enemies, they have 3 hit points, so you know if you've attacked them twice already, there will be no way to get them onto the altar, unless you fancy using a broken arrow. Remember that the spiked shoes will finish off any standard enemy in one hit, so use this to your advantage when dealing with moles and lizards. Try to remember to use your whip to stun enemies when you have the spiked shoes, and want to get a stunned body on the altar. Shotguns and freeze rays are useful, but be sure to check your surroundings. You don't want to hit an off-screen shopkeeper or pet by accident. And make sure you'll hit the target. If you miss and have to wait for the reload, you'll be vulnerable to attacks. Another quick tip I'll throw in here is off-screen arrow traps. I see this complaint thrown around a lot, where an arrow trap has hit the player from off-screen as you run forward, but it really is avoidable 95% of the time. You need to be checking the level below you as much as possible before dropping down by exploring the entire top layer you are on, and then checking down for hazards. You should memorize the hazards that you will be coming in contact with, and have bodies held if you are worried there might be one ahead of you. I hope this helps anyone who finds these 2 enemies intolerable or game-breaking. As with most aspects of Spelunky, it really is a case of practice makes perfect. I understand that some people feel they don't have the reflexes to deal with these kinds of hazards, but it really is more about patience and timing your dodge or attack than physical skill. Let me know in the comments if you need any help with anything, and check out my much longer video, Spelunky 2 Survival Guide, if you want some even more advanced techniques. Thanks for watching.